Alright, this video is about crash course how to solve for unknown variables, and in this video I'm going to be working on the homework in all the examples in the workbook. So we are going to do this in a couple of different sections. This one's just going to be on the order of operations examples, and then the next video will be on the combining like terms, and then each one will just be the next set. Alright, so order of operations, okay? So let's look at our order of operations. This should have been a review for the class. If it isn't a big deal. If you get stuck, just make sure you come back and look at this. So some things I want you to start gearing your mind towards is that the P stands for anything that's a grouping symbol. That's also if I have stuff going on in the top and the bottom of a fraction. Saying I have to work out the top of the fraction and the bottom of the fraction separately. So it's kind of grouping those things together. So that's also considered a grouping symbol. Next is exponents, and I have my students in my classroom actually write ER. I'm waiting for somebody to come up with a new rhyme for me, but no one has yet. Because we can't forget about radicals as well, okay, when we do exponents. And then, of course, multiplication and division and adding and subtracting. So let's go ahead and do this. All right, so in example 1, I look across, I have multiplication going on here and then a subtract and -2. So obviously, if I'm following my PEMDAS with an R in there, a silent R, then I would do this multiplication first. Okay, now some rules of multiplying and dividing sign numbers. If the signs are the same, the answer is positive. If the signs are different, sorry, the answer is going to be negative. So that's kind of your rules of multiplying and dividing sign numbers. So first let's do this. My signs are the same, so it's going to equal a positive number. And if you need more of a explanation on why that works, you want to know why these rules are in place, you need to take my crash course in negative and positive numbers, because I actually go through showing you why this rule is the way it is, because it does follow a pattern in math. It does make sense. Okay, so my answer is positive, and 4 times 3 is 12. Alright, so I have a double negative here. Whenever I have two negative signs beside each other, it's as if there's an understood 1, and I'm multiplying that -1 to that -2, and that means that two negatives in multiplication is actually going to give me a positive. Alright, so those two negatives are going to turn into one big positive. So 2 plus 12 is going to give me the answer of 14. Alright, in our next example, I got a bunch of stuff going on here. Okay, it looks like I have an extra multiplication, so I'm going to go ahead and scribble that off first. But I know for my PEMDAS, I'm going to do what's in the parentheses first. And in that parentheses, I got to do the multiplication first, okay? All right. So 9 times 2 is 18. So I'm still working that parentheses because the parentheses is not finished yet. And I'm going to take -7 plus 18. And that answer is going to give me 11, a positive 11. So let's talk about our rules for adding and subtracting sign numbers. Okay, if the signs are different. Like in this case, I have a -7 and a positive 18. So my signs are different. What I do is, step 1, subtract, which is what I did. I took 18 and I subtract 7. Step 2, take the sign of the bigger number. Well, When we're talking about take the sign of the bigger number, we're talking about the absolute values of the numbers. So just the value of the number, not the sign. Okay, so 18 is my bigger number. So since 18 is positive, my 11 from subtracting the two numbers is going to be positive. So another way you could do that is think of it like money. If I owe $7, but I have 18 in my pocket, well then I have 11 actually. So take the sign of, and I'm going to put the word bigger in absolute value symbols, bigger number. So those are my rules for different signs. Now, what if they are the same sign, which I don't have in this problem? So I'm just going to put it down there, and we'll talk about it in a minute. Let's finish this problem. So this time I have negative 18 plus 11. Signs are different, so I'm going to subtract, giving me 7. But this time the absolute value that is bigger is the 18. The 18 is negative, so my answer would be negative. I can also say I owe $18, I have 11, well I still owe $7. All right. Again, for some reason when I put it into Adobe and then put it back into Word, it put double multiplication symbols. I don't know what's going on. All right, let's go ahead and keep going with this. All right, I want to back up to the last one because I actually made a mistake. I dropped my 6 in the problem. So let's actually go back and work it correctly. Sometimes you just don't see something. Okay, so in this one I have 6 times 11, and I got to do that before the addition because of order of operations. Now, I want to kind of sidebar. There are different ways that I can write multiplication. Okay, I'm just going to cut that. I can go 2 times 3, I can go 2 dot 3, I can go 2 parentheses 3, which is what I have here. A parenthesis also means multiplication. It's very, very important. Okay, and then later in math you'll find that I could put the variable beside the number and it also means multiplication. Alright, so I'm going to multiply these. Very straightforward. Again, this is, I owe 18, but I have 66. That means I have, what does that mean? I have 44, sorry. That's wrong. I did my math too quickly. So I'll do it slowly since this one is one of those tricky ones because the second digit is smaller than the second digit of the first number. It can play tricks on you. Make sure you actually subtract them. See, I did 44 because I went in the wrong direction. It needed to be 4 more in the upward direction because what I did was take the 6 from the 8 in my head, which would have given me a 2, but I was still figuring, I rounded my numbers up to their nearest whole number, to the tens place. And a lot of times our mind plays that trick. We want to make it right with sign numbers. We know it doesn't make sense. Can't take something from nothing. So our mind tries to make it right, and we make these little mistakes. So we have to be very careful. Right, and that's positive because the 66 is bigger and it is positive. All right, so now we're on this one. So again, I got to start with this multiplication. So that is going to be 14. I got to keep my parentheses. This one's exactly like the other one. We still don't have any same signs to talk about, but if we don't run across one by the end of this, I'll just give you the rules. Okay, negative 4 plus the 14 is going to give me a positive 10. Three times 10 is 30. If I owe $15, but I have 30, I have $15 for the weekend, and that would be positive. Okay, so we didn't run any same signs, so I'm going to give you those rules. If the signs are the same And we do the opposite of the first step. Instead of subtract, we add. And we still take the sign of the bigger number, but since they both have the same sign, you're just taking the sign. Okay, so like if I have -3 minus 2, they're both negatives. Okay, you don't have to worry about which one's bigger. They're both negative. It doesn't matter which one's bigger. I'm just going to add the two numbers together and it's going to be negative. Right, again, if you want some more clarification on that, take my crash course on that particular skill. Okay, so we have exponents this time. So the exponent only applies to the thing to the left. So exponents only apply to the thing to the left. So in that first number, -2 squared, it only applies to the 2, not the negative, because it only applies to the thing to the left. Only applied, I-E-D. Now there is one exception, and that is if the thing to the left is a parenthesis, then it applies to everything inside the parenthesis. Kind of like in the second part of this problem where I have this 2 on the outside of the parenthesis, it's going to apply to everything inside of there, okay? So in this one, the negative is kind of out on its own. The exponent means I have 2 2's in multiplication. This one applies to everything inside the parentheses, so it's -2 times -2. And watch how this is going to differ in the way the answer ends up. In this one, we get a 4, and then that negative just drops down and becomes a -4. But in this one, a negative times a negative is going to give me a +4. So this negative essentially is going to cancel each other out. And then my answer is going to be a -8 because they have same sign. Adding and subtracting with same sign means you add the numbers, so 4 plus 4, and you take the sign. They're both negative, so the answer will be negative. It's kind of like I'm compounding, or not compounding, but adding up my debt. I owe $4 and I owe another $4. I'm going to owe $8. Ooh, we only have a few more. Okay, so the first thing that I need to do is my exponents, because I don't have any parentheses. I only have a parenthesis around this, but this parenthesis means multiplication because there's nothing going on the inside. Now what does it multiply to? And that's hard to tell because there's no number on the outside. Whenever there's not a number, it is an understood 1. Okay, so it's actually being multiplied to a -1. Alright, so this one I do not take the exponent to the -3, but I only take it to the 3. So it's going to be 3 times 3, 2 3's in multiplication. But this one, because it's in parentheses, is -3 times -3. Got to keep this in parentheses from my -3 times -3, which is going to give me a +9. Got to keep that in parentheses because it means multiplication to that -1. Alright, so I did all of the exponents in my problem. Now I need to jump down to my multiplication and division, of which I only have one thing here that's being multiplied. A negative and a positive being multiplied together gives me a negative. 1 times 9 is a 9. Now I can just work from left to right with my adding and subtracting. Negative and a negative means I'm going to add the two numbers and it's going to be negative. Negative and a positive means I'm going to subtract the two numbers, and it's going to take the sign of the bigger absolute value. So my answer is -8. Alright, in this one I have a parentheses first. Okay, so I'm going to actually go to the innermost parenthesis. Alright, I'm going to erase that because I covered up my exponent in doing that. Oh, I forgot my 67. Alright, so 2 minus an 8. Different signs. The 8 is negative and the 2 is positive. So I'm going to subtract and get a 6, and it's going to be a -6 because the 8 is the bigger absolute. Alright, now exponents is next on my list. So I'm going to take -6 times -6. Two negatives make a positive in multiplication, giving me a 36. Alright, finish up our parentheses, and that is going to give me a positive 35. Now I need to do that multiplication before I do the subtraction. So I'm going to kind of sidebar it. I know my answer is going to be negative because the 5 is negative, but the 35 is positive. But if I sidebar my math, I see that I made a mistake. That it's a negative 175. Now our signs are different, and in adding and subtracting, that means I subtract them. That's a 5. I get 108, and it's going to be a negative because the 175 is negative. Alright, again, I do what's in the parentheses first. And I got to do the innermost parentheses. So 5 minus 9, which is going to give me a -4. And that -4 is squared. So -4 times -4, which is going to give me positive 16. Alright, let's finish out the parentheses. I have opposite signs, a -2 and a positive 16. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract those and get a 14. And it's going to be positive because the 16 is positive. Got to keep it in parentheses because I got some multiplication going on here. So the next step will be do that multiplication. I know it's going to be negative because the 14 is positive, but the 4 is negative. But I need to actually do my math to figure out that it's 56. Alright, I have different sides. My 81 is positive, but my 56 is negative, which means I subtract. And because the 81 is bigger, it will be a positive 25. Alright, now we're getting into a fraction part. Now remember I told you that that means do me first for the top and the bottom separately. So what I could do when I first see these is put parentheses around the top and parentheses around the bottom. Another thing that I like to do is I like to put a line, and I like to work them out differently. Now in my algebra class, I always do it in different colors, okay? So I'm going to do the top. Let's just work out the top. So now I got to apply order operations within the numerator of my fraction, okay? So the first thing I do is the multiplication. 3 times a -5 is a -15. My numbers are both negative, so I'm going to add, getting 35, and take the sign, which is negative. So now I've finished my top. I like to change my color so I don't get things confused. I'm going to do my bottom in blue. The 2 is on the outside of a parenthesis, the exponent of 2, so it applies to everything, which means it's just a positive 16. Okay, I'm going to subtract these two numbers and get a 5. The 21 is bigger, so it's positive. Now, just like there are different ways to say multiplication, there are different ways to say division. I can say 20 divided by 3. I could say 20, let's make a number that goes in evenly, 5. 20 divided by 5. And notice that when I write it this way, the number that goes into the hat, the divisor symbol, goes first. Well, that's the same in the third way. The third way that I could do this is with a fraction bar. Fractions are actually division, okay? So I could say 5 divided into 20 this way. Notice that it's first here, and that is what goes inside the divisor symbol. So this is saying how many times can 5 go into 35? Well, we know that the answer is 7. But now I got to decide on the sign. Well, remember, it's the same as multiplication. If I have a negative and a positive, my answer will be negative. Last one. All right, so let's do the top. First, I got to do this multiplication. Negative and a positive is going to make a negative 24. Negative and a negative means I add the numbers, okay? And that's going to give me a 33, and it's going to be negative 33. All right, let's do the bottom. The exponent of 2 is on the outside of the parentheses, so it's negative 5 times negative 5, which is going to give me 25. 28 minus 25 is 3. So how many times can 3 go into a negative 33? Well, that answer is a negative 11. Awesome. So that is all the order of operation problems in the notebook, okay, in the workbook. So if you get stuck, watch this video, and then if you get stuck on the next one, on expressions, then watch the next video. I hope this helped.